ball control skills, wedging. So this is where your scoring is really going to make an impact on your scoring by developing these skills. So what we're talking about is wedging, and we want to be able to get good at controlling the height or trajectory of the ball, and then furthermore understanding where that ball needs to land, what we call landing spots. So trajectory and landing spots are the skills we're going to develop. Before that, what do we need to remind our friend at home watching? What do they have to do before they go into this part of the training?
Yeah, I think the old public service announcement 101 would be make sure you calibrate your divot and your center face contact before you start doing these activities, because if your divot's not in the right place, you're not hitting the center of the face, oh my gosh, the ball speed's coming off the club face is going to be all over the place. It's going to influence the trajectory. It's going to be a damn nightmare out there. So make sure that you calibrate the divot and center face contact before moving on to this next portion.
So solid contact first.
Yeah, I got to hit it solid.
Good. So once you're hitting it solid, then we're going to look at the landing spot and the trajectory. So this is, again, an undercoached skill, and once people are aware of it, it really helps. So out here in front of us, we have a couple clubs. So basically demonstrate the landing spot. So a general rule of thumb is you want to get the landing spot as close to you as possible. So now, because on the golf course you're going to face an infinite number of shots, that landing spot is going to change whether there's a bunker in the way or whatever. Having said that, you want to get it as close to you as possible, versus what most folks do is they land the ball too far into the green or too close to the hole, and then it runs off the other side and they end up chipping twice.
What's the old saying, Chad? Balls are round, they're meant to roll.
Balls are round, round things roll. So we're going to land it on the green as soon as possible, and then most of the time it's going to be rolling to the hole. So the skills we want to get good at: landing spots, trajectory control.
Boom.
With an understanding that the ball is going to roll and we're going to fall in line with that versus fight City Hall and do anything other than that. Okay, so where do you want to start? We have this landing spot. We got as close as us as we can get it.
Yeah.
Good. And then what are you going to do here? What club do you have? What are you going to try to focus on?
So I've got my 58-degree wedge, but one reminder at home is sometimes the less feedback you have, the better. So if you're working on landing spots and you're developing that skill, just work on the landing spot. Don't try to get it close to a hole. So you can see right here that Chad's got the two clubs laid out. That represents our landing spot. So we're not going to be concerned where this ball ends up. How we're going to get better at hitting the landing spot is through our friend Goldilocks. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to send the ball past the landing spot, short of the landing spot, and then in the landing spot to develop the skill of controlling your landing spots.
Very good. So solid contact first, and then developing the skill around controlling where it actually lands, yes?
You got it.
All right, you're going to go too far to start or too short?
Let's go too far to start.
All right. All right, very good. So that's what too far feels like.
Not too short.
Very good. So 3 different landing spots, and then the ball ultimately went 3 different distances. So when you start to do this work, start to pay attention between the correlation between where the ball lands and where it ends up. So on this one, are you going to try to go somewhere in between, or what you feel like is just right?
In between, yeah.
All right, so you hit it right in the middle there.
Yep.
And you said you were using your 58. So now that ball rolled, let's say halfway to the hole.
Yeah.
And then let's say that the trajectory came out, it was like waist high-ish.
Yep.
Right? So landing spot and trajectory, we're marrying those up to find out how much the ball will or will not roll, yes?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm paying attention to as I'm doing this is it looks to me that, like, if the ball lands in the landing spot, it's flying one part and it's rolling out about the same distance, right? So it's kind of like this 1-to-1 thing. So if it's flying 5 paces, it's probably going to roll 5 paces. So it makes chipping with my 58-degree wedge somewhat predictable.
Yeah, that's cool. So once you can, well, the cool thing about that is the ratios is once you can control the landing spot, then you can move to identify how much or how little roll you get with a given club.
Most definitely.
All right, so in this example, on that last one, you did hit the landing spot, and it's still only halfway to the hole.
It's way short, yeah.
Yep. So at that trajectory, it really was too high to roll the rest of the way.
That is true.
So good rule of thumb, the higher trajectory, the less the ball will roll. The lower the trajectory, the more the ball will roll.
Yep.
All right, and then back to the easy button. What could you do in a simple type of way to make that trajectory come out lower so it will roll more?
I just switch clubs. So I don't need to switch ball position. I don't need to switch shaft lean. I can just switch clubs. So one of the clubs that doesn't go as high is my 58 degree is going to be my pitching wedge. So now the pitching wedge should roll a lot more than that 58 degree did.
So you hit the landing spot beautifully. It's like you'd practiced that shot already.
Yeah. And the ball ends up relatively close to the hole.
Yeah, so because you have the landing spot developed, just by switching clubs, allowed you to get the distance appropriate.
You got it.
Very good. So trying to figure out the marriage between how high or low and where it needs to land to figure out the appropriate shot.
Yep.
Now, if we moved over there or over there, this would change. So it changes all the time. Is that fair to say?
All the time.
Back to being adaptable. So to get people to understand this, what's the easiest way you can get folks to understand this concept without confusing things?
Which club to hit?
Or just the marriage between the landing spot and the trajectory?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing that you can do at home is just getting down on one knee so you're at the same height that you're hitting from, and then just start tossing balls. So here's an example of how this would work, right? So
let's go somewhere different, since we already demonstrated that. So what about over here? So let's say you hit your shot in here, and here you sit. This is a different shot.
Yeah. So I could get down on one knee here and just do a gentle toss, and just kind of observe how the ball rolls out. So now what I'm trying to figure out here is, well, what club now goes that high?
Yeah, easy question to ask is what club would make it look like that? So tossing will allow you to see what the ball needs to look like. If you can't see what it needs to look like first, you're going to have a hard time understanding this relationship.
That is true.
So now with the clubs that we have here, what club do you feel like will make it look like that?
I think it's pretty similar to the last shot I hit. I think my pitching wedge will go that same height.
Let's see if that's true. So the pitching wedge made it come out looking similar to the toss, and ultimately it ended up
in the same damn place as the toss. How about that, huh?
Yeah, so we can't encourage you to do this ball tossing activity enough, and then the more different lies or looks that you expose it to, the more you'll understand the marriage between this trajectory and the landing spot. And then move to the club selection. What club would make it look like that? We can't tell you how many times we played with folks and they pull their cart up next to the green on the cart path, and they just grab the 58 or 56, the sand wedge, and the putter, and they don't consider what the shot is. So the club selection, the decision that needs to be made last, is often made without any consideration or is made first.
Yeah.
So people make mistakes just because they don't have a process in place.
One of the things that I love to do when I'm walking up to the green, because I think everybody's always worried about, well, how many clubs should I grab? Grab every other. So oftentimes what you'll see me do is I'll start at the cart, I'll grab my 58 degree wedge, I'll grab my gap wedge, and then I'll grab my 9-iron. So I have 3 nice options available to me for the situation that I'm about to encounter.
Something 9-iron, make it low roll, let's come out low.
58 is high, and then I've got my in-between with the gap wedge.
Yeah, very good. So the skills you really want to get good at: controlling the landing spot, play with Goldilocks like we had talked about, hit it long, hit it short. You really want to get good at controlling that skill or getting more skillful at that. And having said that, you can change clubs, hit it higher, hit it lower. That'll make the ball roll more or less.
Yep, most definitely.
If you start with the ball tossing, that'll make this clearer, easier to understand, and then doing it from a variety of different spaces will give you the best, most broad perspective on this. So when you're practicing, your practice becomes not only easier, but much more effective. Okay, if we talked about hitting it lower and higher, so if we go to trajectory, let's go back over here. What are some different ways to make the ball come out higher or lower?
So,
because club selection was one of the ways, but there's other ways.
That is true, especially once you get into a lot of the specialty shots with trying to hit balls, like for example, especially high. So I think many of you are probably familiar with the flop shot. That's what everybody loves to see because it's the sexy shot, but it's definitely not the shot that you always want to play. So now, some things that are going to influence how high or how low the ball goes is one would be the lean of the shaft. So the more I lean the shaft forward, the less loft that's presented on the face, the lower the ball is going to go. And then the more I lean the shaft backwards, you can now notice that club face is laying backwards. It's almost flat as a pancake. Now that ball is going to go exceptionally high. So we have slight, moderate, and severe forward, slight, moderate, severe backwards, and then you have your somewhat neutral. So that's one way that you can get this ball to actually go a bunch of different heights.
All right, very good. So shaft lean is one of them.
Yep.
One thing we hear a lot is ball position. So show us how setting up with this ball in different places in your stance would influence this height or trajectory.
So it's pretty similar to what it did with the shaft lean. So you can see the more forward I go, the more the shaft is going to lean backwards, the more loft that's presented. So the ball would go higher. And then if I throw it more back in the stance, usually the shaft lean goes with it. You can see that the loft on the face kind of starts to lessen the lower this ball is going to go. So more forward in the stance higher, more back in the stance lower. And then you have all your in-between zones.
Nice. Any other ways that you can think to get the ball to go higher or lower?
Yeah, you can have some fun with this. One way that you can experiment with higher and lower too is the handle height. So the more you lower the handle, the more the face wants to open, the higher it goes. The higher you move the handle, the less loft there is, the lower it goes. So that's another way. I can open the face on the backswing. That's going to make it go higher. I can keep it closed or hooded on the backswing. That's going to make it go lower. I think wrist hinge is another thing that you can play around with. So the more I hinge the wrist at the top and then unhinge the wrist at the bottom, the higher it's going to go. The more I keep the shaft leaning coming into impact, the lower it's going to go. So you can play around with that one as well. But Chad, I think the underlying theme is if you think of people that have really good short games, I think a lot of times what you notice about people that have those good short games is they spend a lot of time around the green with wedges in their hand, and they're just being playful. They're running experiments when they're out there. So the more time you spend around the green playing around with these shots, the better short game you're going to have, because you need an infinite number of shots around the green.
That changes all the time. Yep, so it changes all the time. So having said that, you can hit it higher, you can hit it lower. More club, less club, open the face, close the face, lean the shaft forward, so on and so forth, all the things you just talked about. We can't encourage you enough to go back to the one common denominator in all of this, one motion, right? So as far as trying to smooth out the swingy motion is the best thing you can do to get control of the landing spot and make more solid contact, so that you can start to figure out if you need a little higher shot or lower shot, what have you.
Yeah, I think one of the demonstrations we do a lot at GLA, or at B-Golf, is a lot of tossing ideas, right? So if you think of, if I'm going to toss Chad a ball, how I control the distance is I look at Chad, and my arm swings freely back and forth, and then I get the ball to go that distance. Well, you can use those same concepts when you chip. If you think about when you're chipping, you would look at where you want the ball to land, maybe not the pin so much, but look at the landing spot, and then just make sure the club is being swung freely back and forth. We think a lot of times there's way too many people that are trying to calculate or almost compute how far the club needs to go back or the speed that they need to swing the club at to get the ball to go a desired distance, but that's not how we control distance with any other object control sport that we play. It's a matter of you look at the landing spot and then there's freedom attached to it.
Right.
So use that when you play.
Yeah, go back to the free swinging motion. One thing before we go here, to make the cleanest contact around the greens, assuming it's not in the rough.
Sure.
And demonstrate this free swinging motion here. And then let's talk about, like, is there going to be a divot around the greens or no divot? And then what part of the club are we trying to get to interact with the turf?
Yeah, in a perfect world, we still want the golf club to interact with the turf. If you're looking to make solid contact, the club has to interact with the turf. But I think what helps a lot when you're around the green is there's a part of your golf club, we call it the bounce. It's the surface area built up between the leading edge of the club and the trailing edge of the club. So this middle part is built up a little bit. So we're trying to get that part of the golf club to interact with the turf so it skips off the turf. We don't want it to dig too much. So that's the part of the golf club that you're trying to get to interact with the turf.
So Ben, show us a swinging motion where you try to get the bottom of that club to interact with the turf. Very good. So you can see it just kind of bruised the turf, if you will. There was no digging, no big old divots. So going back to one motion to get that ball, the loft of the club will do its job and elevate.
You got it.
Okay. Skills are pay the bills. Skills are the name of the game. What you're trying to get good at is controlling the landing spot and then the appropriate trajectory to figure out how far or how little the ball will roll. So play with this. Tossing is going to help you the most. Keep up your training and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.